Hi guys, tonight we begin with "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," the poem that invented Santa Claus. Before Santa wore red, before reindeer flew, before stockings hung by the fire, Christmas was quiet, cold, and very different. One gentle poem, written for children on a winter night, changed everything. This is the true bedtime story of how a few simple words created the Santa the whole world believes in. Before you get comfortable, please like and subscribe my channel Sleepsea, and also let me know in comment your country name and what it is the time for you. It always fascinated to see you joining us around the world. Now dim the light, take a deep breath, and let's start the journey together. The night was quiet, not the kind of quiet we know today, filled with distant traffic or humming lights. This was an older kind of silence, a silence made of snow, breath, and candlelight. Outside, the world rested beneath a thin white blanket. Snow clung softly to rooftops and bare branches. The wind moved gently, as if careful not to wake anyone. In small wooden homes, candles flickered behind frosted windows, casting warm yellow light into the dark winter night. This was Christmas Eve, but not the Christmas we know today. There were no glowing electric lights, no flashing decorations, no red-suited man racing across the sky. There were no flying reindeer, no chimneys filled with magic, no stockings heavy with gifts. In these homes, Christmas was something quieter, something softer. Families gathered close, not around televisions or trees piled with presents, but around simple tables and small fires. A loaf of bread, a bowl of stew. A shared meal meant warmth, and warmth meant safety. Parents whispered prayers. Children listened carefully. The words were familiar, spoken every year, passed down gently like old songs. Christmas in these days was a holy night, a night of reflection, a night of patience. The air inside these homes smelled of wood smoke and wax. Shadows danced on the walls as flames moved slowly. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the world in silence. Inside, families sat close together, sharing stories, reading scripture, or simply resting in the comfort of being together. Children did not rush to sleep dreaming of gifts. They listened instead. They listened to the crackle of the fire, to the voice of a parent reading softly, to the sound of wind brushing against the walls. If gifts came at all, they were small: an apple, a handmade toy, a warm scarf. Christmas was not yet about abundance. It was about survival, faith, and hope during the darkest days of winter. In this world, winter ruled everything. The nights were long, the cold was deep, and light, real light, was precious. Candles were used carefully. Fires were kept small. People understood that warmth did not come easily, and neither did joy. And yet, joy still existed. It lived in simple things: a shared laugh, a familiar prayer, a quiet moment of peace. Far away across the ocean, stories of St. Nicholas existed, a kind bishop from long ago, a figure of generosity and charity, but he was distant, European, a whisper of tradition, not yet a living presence in American homes. No one was waiting for him tonight. No child pressed their ear to the floor, listening for hooves on the roof. No one wondered how reindeer could fly. No one imagined a sleigh gliding through moonlight. Santa Claus, as we know him, did not yet exist. And yet, the night held something special. It always does. Because winter nights invite imagination. They stretch time. They slow the world. When darkness lasts long enough, the mind begins to wander gently. Stories grow warmer. Words become comfort. In these quiet homes, something invisible was forming. Not yet a character, not yet a legend, but a feeling. A desire for warmth, joy, and gentle wonder during the coldest night of the year. A need for a story that could soften winter's edge. And somewhere, in the calm stillness of a snowy night like this one, a simple poem waited to be written. A poem that would change Christmas forever. But for now, the night remained quiet. Snow continued to fall, candles burned low, children slept peacefully, and the world rested, unaware that soon a new figure would step softly into the imagination of millions. A figure born not from noise or spectacle, but from calm words, winter silence, and the gentle rhythm of a Christmas night. Before the poem was ever written, Christmas lived a quieter life. It did not shout for attention. It did not sparkle loudly. It arrived softly, like snow falling after sunset. In early 18th and early 19th century America, Christmas was still finding its place. The young nation was busy surviving, building, and becoming something new. People worked hard. Winters were cold. Life was simple and often difficult. Christmas was important, but not yet magical. In many homes, December 25th passed almost like any other winter day, just slightly more meaningful. Churches held services, families prayed, some shared special meals if they could afford them. But there was no single way to celebrate, no shared image, no universal tradition. Every region remembered Christmas differently. In some towns, Christmas was deeply religious. People focused on the birth of Christ, spending the day quietly in church or at home. Loud celebration was discouraged. Joy was meant to be calm and respectful. In other places, Christmas barely stood out at all. Puritan influence still lingered, especially in New England. To some, Christmas felt suspicious, too festive, too indulgent. There were places where Christmas celebrations had once been banned entirely, seen as unnecessary or even sinful. So, the holiday remained uneven, fragmented. Children did not yet grow up with one shared Christmas story. There was no Santa Claus visiting every home. The figure of Saint Nicholas existed, but faintly. He was known mostly through European stories, a bishop from long ago, a man associated with charity and kindness. But he was not yet part of everyday American family life. He did not travel through the sky. He did not laugh. He did not squeeze down chimneys. If children received gifts, they were modest. A small toy, something handmade, a treat saved for weeks. Gifts were reminders of care, not expectations of abundance. Often gifts were given on New Year's Day instead of Christmas, or on St. Nicholas Day in early December, in families that still remembered old European customs. But again, nothing was shared across the entire country. Christmas belonged to local memory, not national imagination. In one home, a child might receive an orange or a ribbon. In another, nothing at all. In some homes, parents told Bible stories. In others, folk tales. And in many homes, children simply went to bed early, wrapped tightly in blankets, listening to the wind outside. There were no stockings hanging with care, no lists written with hope, no idea that one night could feel different from all others. Yet something important was missing and quietly waiting. Winter in America was long and unforgiving. Snow-blocked roads. Darkness arrived early. Fires burned low, and people needed comfort. Not only physical warmth, but emotional warmth too. They needed something gentle to look forward to. Stories had always filled that role. Families told tales to pass the long nights. Old stories from Europe, Bible stories, legends shared again and again. Stories made winter smaller, softer, bearable. And slowly, without anyone planning it, Christmas began to lean toward imagination. Not away from faith, but alongside it. People wanted something that could live in the quiet space between prayer and sleep, something that could make children feel safe, something that could turn a cold night into something warm. But that story had not yet arrived. Christmas at this time was still forming its identity. It was a holiday without a face, without a single voice, without a shared dream. And that is what made the moment so ready. Because when traditions are not yet fixed, a single idea can change everything. All it takes is the right words, spoken at the right time, on the right night. And somewhere in this uncertain, quiet version of Christmas, somewhere between candlelight and snowfall, a poem waited patiently. A poem that would give Christmas a character, a rhythm, a sense of gentle wonder. But before that poem could exist, winter had to do what winter does best: slow the world down, quiet the noise, and leave space for imagination to enter. Winter came early in those days. It did not arrive politely or gently. It came with sharp winds, heavy snow, and long nights that seemed to stretch forever. In early America, winter was not a season. It was a presence, something felt in the bones, in the breath, in the quiet that followed sunset. Towns and villages rested beneath layers of snow. Wooden houses stood close together, their roofs weighed down by white drifts. Smoke curled slowly from chimneys, rising into pale winter skies before disappearing into the cold air. Inside, homes were dim and warm, only near the fire. Candles were precious. Oil lamps burned carefully. When night arrived, families gathered close, because light did not reach far. Shadows filled corners. Wind whispered through cracks in wooden walls. And outside, darkness ruled most of the day. The sun rose late. It set early. And between those moments, winter seemed endless. Children finished chores early and stayed indoors. Adults worked quietly, conserving energy and supplies. Firewood was stacked carefully. Food was rationed. Nothing was wasted, because winter punished carelessness. In the evenings, families gathered in the same room, not for entertainment, but for warmth. One fire, one shared space, bodies close together beneath blankets and wool. This was when stories mattered most. Voices softened, time slowed, someone began to speak, and the room leaned in. Stories filled the space that winter left empty. Some stories were old, passed down from grandparents. Others were religious. Some were simple memories told again and again. But all served the same purpose: to make the cold feel farther away. Storytelling turned fear into comfort. Children listened with wide eyes, their faces lit by flickering firelight. Outside, the wind pressed against the walls, snow tapped softly at windows. But inside, words created warmth. Winter invited imagination. When the world outside became still, the mind wandered gently. People imagined brighter days, kinder moments, things unseen but comforting. This is why winter has always been the season of stories. The darkness gave them room to grow. Christmas, arriving in the heart of winter, carried that same quiet power. It did not yet have a single story of its own, but it lived inside many small ones. A prayer whispered softly, a song hummed under breath, a tale told to calm a child before sleep. These moments shaped memory. In early America, there was little to distract from them. No machines, no glowing screens, just voices, firelight, and the rhythm of time slowing down. And as snow continued to fall night after night, the idea of something gentle arriving in the darkness began to feel natural. A visitor, a presence, a kindness moving quietly through the night. Winter prepared people for belief. Not loud belief, not demanding belief, but soft belief. The kind that slips into the mind while half asleep, while listening to a familiar voice telling a familiar story. And so, Long before Santa Claus had a name or a shape, the world was ready for him. The nights were already long enough. The homes were already quiet enough. The hearts were already open enough. All that was missing was the story itself. And somewhere, in a warm room filled with candlelight and children's laughter, that story was about to be written. Every story has a beginning, but not every beginning announces itself. Some beginnings arrive quietly, like a thought formed late at night, or a word written only to bring a smile. This story begins not with ambition, not with fame, but with a man who did not know he was about to change Christmas forever. His name was Clement Clark Moore. He was not a performer. He was not a storyteller by trade. He was not searching for attention. He was simply a quiet man. Moore lived a calm, orderly life. He was a scholar, a teacher, a man who valued learning and faith. His days were filled with books, lectures, and thoughtful routines. He enjoyed structure. He enjoyed calm. And above all, he enjoyed the peaceful rhythm of family life. He lived in a world far removed from noise and spectacle. In his home, evenings were gentle. Children gathered near him. Conversations were slow and thoughtful. There was laughter, but not chaos. Warmth, but not excess. Moore wrote often, but not poetry meant for the world. He wrote sermons, academic works, serious texts, words meant to teach, not entertain. Poetry, when it appeared, was rare and private, something personal, something shared only with those he loved. And yet, like many parents, Moore understood the quiet magic of winter nights. He understood how children listened differently when snow fell outside, how their imaginations softened when firelight flickered on the walls, how a simple story could turn fear into comfort. He did not plan to create a legend. He did not sit down thinking of history. He simply wanted to give his children a moment of joy. The world around him was still forming. America itself was young. Traditions were unsettled. Christmas had no single voice. And that gave Moore space to imagine freely, without rules. He did not feel pressure to honor an established character. There was no Santa to imitate, no expectations to meet. Only a quiet night. Only listening children. Only words waiting to be spoken. Moore's home reflected this calm. Candles burned softly. Books lined the walls. The air smelled faintly of wax and wood. Outside, winter held the world still. Inside, warmth gathered slowly, patiently. This was not a house chasing excitement. It was a house that valued peace. And in that peace, imagination found room to move. Moore was the kind of man who noticed details. The way snow changed sound, the way night reshaped familiar rooms, the way children leaned closer when a voice softened. He understood timing. And he understood tone. He knew that loud stories startled, but gentle ones stayed. So when words came to him, they came quietly. Not as a performance, not as a public declaration, but as a gift. A gift meant only for one night, one family, one moment. He could not know what those words would become. He could not imagine newspapers printing them, children memorizing them, generations repeating them word for word. At that moment, he was simply a father in winter, a father listening to the wind outside, a father sensing that something small and kind could make the night feel warmer. The greatest stories often begin this way, not with intention, but with care. And in that calm home, with snow falling silently beyond the windows, the conditions were perfect. Perfect for a poem. Perfect for imagination, perfect for a story that would move gently from one family to another, year after year. The world was quiet enough to listen, and soon it would hear something new. The night was cold, but the room was warm. Outside, winter pressed softly against the walls, as it always did. Snow gathered quietly on rooftops. Wind moved slowly through bare branches. But inside, there was light, and there were voices, and there was laughter waiting to happen. Clement Clark Moore sat with his children, watching their faces glow in the firelight. The day had been long, chores had been finished, supper had been eaten, and now, like so many nights before, it was time for calm. Children, in winter, do not want excitement before sleep. They want comfort. They want something gentle to carry them into dreams. Moore understood this. He had watched it many times, the way a child's body relaxes when a familiar voice begins to speak, the way eyes grow heavy as words flow slowly, like falling snow. And so, on this winter evening, he began to imagine, not carefully, not academically, but playfully. He imagined a visitor, not a frightening one, not a strict one, but a cheerful one, a figure that felt safe. He did not look to books or traditions for guidance. He allowed his thoughts to wander freely, shaped only by warmth, winter, and the quiet joy of family. The words came softly, not written for the world, not written for history, written only for listening ears. He described a night like this one, a house at rest, children tucked in, the world silent beneath snow, and into that silence he let something wonderful appear, a man, small, round, laughing, not a bishop, not a saint in robes, but a friendly visitor with bright eyes and a kind smile. Moore smiled as he spoke. The children leaned closer. The poem moved easily, like breath. Each line flowed into the next, playful and light. The rhythm was gentle, the imagery clear, nothing rushed, nothing shouted. It was the kind of poem meant to be heard, not studied. A bedtime poem. There was no thought of legacy, no concern for accuracy, no worry about rules, only joy. As he continued, the visitor became more vivid. He arrived not on foot but through the sky. He brought laughter, not judgment. He came quietly, without waking anyone. And when the poem ended, there was silence again. The good kind, the kind that follows something meaningful. The children smiled, their faces softened. The room felt warmer somehow, even though the fire burned no brighter than before. Moore did not write the poem down right away. It lived first in sound, in memory, in that moment. Because poems meant for children are not meant to be preserved at first. They are meant to pass gently from voice to ear, then fade into sleep. That was enough. At least, it was meant to be. He could not know that these words would not fade, that they would travel far beyond that room, far beyond that winter, far beyond that quiet night. He could not know that he had just given Christmas a character, a shape, a heartbeat. At that moment, the poem belonged only to the children listening, and as they drifted towards sleep, the visitor drifted with them, softly, kindly, without demand, just like a dream. The poem did not rush into the world. It stepped out quietly. In the winter of 1823, a small newspaper printed a simple poem. There was no fanfare, no announcement, no author's name attached, just words resting on a page waiting to be read. The poem began softly. 'Twas the night before Christmas. Readers encountered it the way many things were discovered then, by chance. A paper opened near a window, a candle placed carefully beside it, a reader settling into a chair as snow gathered outside. There were no expectations, and that is why the poem felt like a gift. It described a house at rest, just like the reader's own. Children asleep, a home wrapped in winter silence, the familiar calm of a Christmas night. Then, gently, something new appeared, not loudly, not suddenly, but naturally. A visitor, a sleigh, a laugh. The rhythm of the poem carried readers forward without effort. It was easy to follow, easy to remember. The words felt like they belonged to winter itself. People smiled as they read. Some read it aloud to their children that very night. Others saved it, folded inside coats or books, to be read again later. The poem did not demand attention. It invited it. And because it was published without a name, the poem felt communal. It belonged to everyone. No one argued with it. No one questioned it. It slipped easily into homes because it asked for nothing. It offered only warmth. Children listened, wide-eyed but calm. Parents noticed how quiet the room became when the poem was read, how easily sleep followed. It felt familiar, even though it was new. The poem spread slowly, the way good stories always do. One paper printed it, then another, then another. Sometimes with small changes, sometimes copied by hand, sometimes recited from memory. There was no rush. The poem moved at winter's pace. Families began reading it every Christmas Eve, not because they were told to, but because it felt right, because the words fit the night. They fit the snow, they fit the silence, they fit the waiting. And over time, the opening line became something special, a signal. When those words were spoken, children knew what time it was. The night had changed, Christmas had arrived. Still, no one spoke of invention. No one said history was being made. The poem was simply becoming tradition, and traditions are born quietly. The author remained unknown to most readers, and that was fine. The poem did not need a face behind it. It already had one forming inside the imagination. A small man, a warm laugh, a gentle presence moving through the dark. By the time Clement Clark Moore's name would later be attached to the poem, it had already escaped him. It no longer belonged to a single home or family. It belonged to winter nights everywhere, and with each reading, the image grew clearer. Santa was no longer just a thought. He was becoming real. Before this poem, Santa did not look the way we imagine him now. He had no fixed face, no clear shape, no gentle laugh that children recognized. Earlier figures were distant and stern. St. Nicholas appeared more as a religious symbol than a visitor. He belonged to churches, not rooftops. To adults, not children. He was respected, but not familiar. Then the poem offered something entirely new. Not a saint on a pedestal, not a judge watching from afar, but a visitor who felt welcome. This Santa was small, almost playful, light enough to land on a roof without a sound, cheerful enough to laugh in the quiet of night. He did not speak loudly. He did not command attention. He smiled, and that smile changed everything. The poem described him with warmth instead of authority. His eyes twinkled, his cheeks were rosy, his laughter was soft, like a shared secret. This Santa was not someone to fear or obey. He was someone to trust. Children heard this Santa and felt safe. Parents read the lines and felt comfort instead of worry. The image fit perfectly into the stillness of a sleeping house. This Santa moved gently. He worked quietly. He left no mess behind. Even his arrival felt respectful. He came when everyone was asleep. He asked for nothing. He judged no one. He simply gave. That alone was revolutionary. For the first time, Santa belonged fully to children, not as a lesson, not as a warning, but as a friend. The poem did not tell children to behave. It did not threaten coal or punishment. It showed Santa smiling, pleased, content. Kindness had replaced discipline, and because of that, Santa felt human. He made mistakes. He laughed at himself. He worked hard but joyfully. He was busy but never rushed. He was magical yet familiar. Readers could picture him easily. And once pictured, he stayed. Families began talking about Santa as if he had always existed this way. The poem's version quietly replaced older images without conflict. No debates, no resistance, just acceptance. Because this Santa made sense. He fit the home, he fit the night, he fit the heart. Children fell asleep, imagining his soft boots on the roof. Parents smiled, knowing the story would calm their children instead of exciting them too much. Santa became part of bedtime, part of winter, part of waiting. The poem had not argued for this Santa. It had simply shown him, and that was enough. From that moment on, Santa would never be stern again, never distant, never cold. He would be warm. And once warmth enters a winter story, it never leaves. The night grew quieter as the poem continued. Snow rested gently on rooftops. Windows glowed faintly with candlelight. And then, without warning, the sky itself became part of the story. Before this poem, the night sky on Christmas Eve was empty. No sleigh, no bells, no movement above the sleeping world. But suddenly, the air was alive. A soft sound drifted through the darkness, not loud, not frightening, just enough to stir curiosity. A light, musical ringing that felt almost like a dream. Sleigh bells. The poem lifted Santa off the ground and placed him among the stars. And with him came something entirely new. 8 tiny reindeer. They were not wild or fearsome creatures. They were small, quick, and obedient. They moved together as one gentle team, carrying Santa across the cold night. Each had a name. This was the first time in history that the reindeer were named, not as symbols, not as legends, but as companions: Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donder, Blitzen. The names sounded playful, musical, almost like a rhyme meant to be whispered. Children could remember them easily. Parents could repeat them softly. They felt alive. And because they had names, they felt real. The sleigh itself was just as important. It was not grand or heavy. It did not thunder through the sky. It moved lightly, gliding through the air as if winter itself were carrying it. The moon reflected off its runners. The night opened a path just for it. For the first time, Christmas became a sky-bound event. Children lying in bed could look up and imagine something passing above them, something gentle, something magical. The sky was no longer empty. It was full of possibility. The poem did not describe loud magic or bright explosions. There were no flashing lights, no overwhelming wonder. Everything remained calm. The sleigh flew smoothly. The reindeer moved swiftly but quietly. The night stayed peaceful. Even magic in this story respected sleep. That mattered. Parents trusted this vision. It did not excite children into restlessness. It guided their imaginations gently, like a lullaby. The idea of flight added freedom to Santa's journey. He was no longer limited by roads or borders. He could visit every home, no matter how distant. Snowstorms could not stop him. Darkness could not hide him. Winter became his path, not his enemy. And once that image existed, it spread effortlessly. Children began listening for bells on Christmas Eve. Adults found themselves glancing at the moon. Rooftops gained new meaning. Every sound in the night became a question. Was that the wind, or something more? The poem had not demanded belief. It simply offered wonder, and wonder once given travels far. From that moment on, Christmas Eve was never just a night again. It became a journey, a quiet flight across a sleeping world. As the sleigh passed over rooftops and the reindeer moved silently through the sky, the poem gently guided Santa toward the homes below. But one quiet question remained. How would he enter? Before this poem, there was no clear answer. Doors were locked against the cold. Windows were shut tight. Winter nights were not welcoming places. Homes were sealed, protected, guarded. Yet the poem offered a solution that felt both practical and magical. The chimney. In winter, the chimney was the warm heart of the house. Smoke rose from it every evening. Fires burned beneath it. Families gathered nearby for warmth and light. The chimney was never closed to the sky. It stood open, breathing warmth upward into the cold night. And so, in the poem, Santa did not force his way inside. He followed the path already made by warmth itself. He came down the chimney, not crashing, not clumsy, but gently, quietly, as if he had always belonged there. This single image changed everything. The chimney became a doorway between worlds, a place where winter air and household warmth met, a silent passage that required no permission. Children began looking at chimneys differently. What had once been just stone and smoke now held mystery. If Santa could come through the chimney, then magic could enter without fear. And then there were the stockings. Before the poem, stockings were simply clothing, woolen socks hung by the fire to dry after long, cold days. Practical things for sore feet and frozen toes. The poem gave them a new purpose. They were hung with care, not by accident, not for warmth, but in hope, small, quiet hope. The stockings were empty, waiting, and waiting itself became part of the tradition. Children learned that gifts did not need to be large. They did not need to overflow. Even a small surprise carried meaning if it came with love. The poem made gift-giving gentle. Santa did not arrive with noise or announcements. He did not wake the house. He worked softly, carefully. He filled the stockings and moved on. This mattered deeply. It turned Christmas into a secret, something private, something meant for morning discovery rather than nighttime excitement. Children slept through the miracle. That was the beauty of it. When morning came, the magic was already finished. Proof remained, but the moment itself belonged to the night. This created trust. Santa did not demand attention. He did not ask for thanks. He left joy quietly and disappeared. Parents embraced this idea. It allowed children to sleep peacefully, knowing something kind was happening while they rested. And slowly, homes changed. Stockings began appearing near fireplaces. Chimneys were cleaned more carefully. Fires were banked lower on Christmas Eve. All because of a poem. The rituals formed without instruction. No one announced them. No rule book existed. Families simply followed the story. The chimney, the stockings, the gifts. Together, they created a rhythm. A calm Christmas rhythm that still echoes today. The poem did not arrive all at once. It did not burst into the world with fanfare or celebration. Instead, it traveled the way winter stories often do, slowly, quietly, from one warm room to another. In 1823, when the poem first appeared in a small newspaper, it carried no author's name. It asked for no attention. It simply sat on the page, waiting for someone to read it aloud. And they did. Families gathered near fireplaces during long winter nights. Candles flickered. Outside, snow pressed softly against windows. Inside, someone would unfold a newspaper and begin to read. 'Twas the night before Christmas. The words felt different from anything else. They were calm, playful, gentle. Listeners smiled. Children leaned closer. Parents read slower, savoring each line. The poem did not command belief. It invited imagination. Soon people began saving it. Newspapers reprinted it during the holiday season. Other towns picked it up. Other families shared it, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. The poem became part of Christmas Eve itself. Parents began reading it every year, at the same time, in the same place. Children learned the rhythm of the words before they understood their meaning. For many families, it became the final sound of the night before sleep. A story that signaled rest. A story that promised something gentle would happen while they dreamed. As America grew, so did the poem's reach. From small villages to growing cities, from wooden homes to brick houses, the same lines were spoken. They created a shared picture. Even families who had never met imagined the same Santa, the same sleigh, the same reindeer names. This was something new. America had few shared traditions at the time. Customs differed from place to place. Accents changed from town to town. But this poem crossed those differences. It offered a common dream. By the mid-1800s, the poem had become inseparable from Christmas. Children expected it. Parents relied on it. Newspapers treated it as tradition. Some readers even memorized it, reciting it from memory on Christmas Eve. The poem did something rare. It gave a young nation a shared moment of calm. During times of uncertainty, expansion, and change, the poem remained steady. Each year, it returned exactly the same. The words did not change. The story did not grow darker. Santa did not age. That consistency mattered. It made Christmas feel safe. Eventually, people began asking who wrote it. The mystery lingered, but it did not diminish the poem's power. By then, it no longer belonged to one person. It belonged to everyone. The poem had become a quiet national ritual, passed from voice to voice, fire to fire, year to year. And as it spread, something else began to happen. Artists started to see Santa, not just imagine him, but draw him. For many years, Santa existed only in words. He lived in the rhythm of the poem, in the soft laughter of children, in the quiet imagination of families gathered near firelight. Each listener saw him a little differently. Some imagined him small. Some imagined him tall. Some saw him thin. Others round and full of warmth. But slowly, very slowly, artists began to give him a face. In the early and mid-1800s, newspapers and books started adding illustrations to the poem. These images were simple at first, etched in black ink, lightly shaded, sometimes clumsy. Yet they all shared something important. Santa was no longer distant. He smiled. His eyes sparkled with mischief and kindness. His cheeks were round, touched with cold and laughter. His body looked soft, not threatening. This was not a saint on a pedestal. This was not a stern judge. This was someone children could trust. Artists returned again and again to the poem for guidance. Every detail came from those lines. The jolly old elf, the round little belly, the pipe, the fur-lined coat. The words shaped the image. One artist in particular, Thomas Nast, would later play a major role. Through magazine illustrations, he began drawing Santa in ways that felt familiar and comforting. Santa grew fuller, warmer, more human. His coat became heavier, suited for long winter journeys. His beard grew thick and white, a sign of age and wisdom, but never of weakness. He looked like someone who had lived many winters and enjoyed them. With each illustration, the image became more consistent. Families began to expect Santa to look a certain way. Children recognized him instantly, and slowly, almost without anyone noticing, Santa's form settled into place. He was no longer just a character in a poem. He was a presence. Shops displayed his image. Holiday cards featured him. Window displays showed him smiling, waving, preparing for his journey. The poem had given him life. Art gave him a body. By the late 19th century, Santa Claus looked nearly the same everywhere. Round face, bright eyes, warm expression, heavy coat. A figure of joy, not fear. A visitor who brought gifts, not warnings. A symbol of kindness, generosity, and warmth during the coldest time of year. Even as times changed, Santa did not. Wars came, cities grew, technology advanced. But Santa remained the same friendly figure, slipping quietly through the night. All because of a poem written without ambition. A poem meant only to make children smile before sleep. And now, Santa was no longer just for children. He had become part of culture, part of memory, part of how people imagine Christmas itself. Yet his purpose remained gentle, to bring comfort, to soften winter, to remind people, for one quiet night, that kindness still traveled the world unseen. As the years passed, the poem became more than a holiday rhyme. It became comfort. In the 1800s, life was not easy. Winters were long, illness was common, many families lost children young. Wars, poverty, and uncertainty touched nearly every household. Christmas arrived not as a season of bright lights and endless gifts, but as a quiet pause in a difficult year. And in that quiet pause, the poem found its place. Families gathered close to the fire, candles flickered softly. Outside, snow pressed against windows, and the wind whispered through the dark. Someone would begin to read. "'Twas the night before Christmas." The words felt gentle, familiar, safe. For children, the poem offered magic without fear. Santa did not judge, he did not demand, he did not threaten. He came quietly, he gave freely. He asked for nothing. For parents, the poem offered something just as important: hope. It reminded them that joy could exist even in hardship. That imagination could warm a room as much as fire. That kindness could travel farther than money ever could. The poem balanced faith and fantasy in a way few stories ever had. Christmas remained a religious holiday. Churches were still full, prayers were still spoken. But now there was room for wonder too. Santa did not replace faith, he softened it. He became a symbol of generosity, not reward or punishment. A reminder that giving could be joyful, that love could be quiet, that goodness did not need to announce itself. During hard winters, the poem helped children sleep. During uncertain times, it helped parents breathe. Even adults listening quietly felt something ease inside them. The world outside might be cold, but inside, for a few moments, it was warm. The poem did not ask anyone to believe in Santa as truth. It asked them to feel something, and they did. That feeling, gentle, hopeful, peaceful, became tied to Christmas itself. Generation after generation returned to the same words, not because they were new, but because they were steady. In a changing world, the poem stayed the same, and that sameness became comfort. Santa, as shaped by the poem, was not powerful because he was magical. He was powerful because he was kind. And in a world that often felt harsh, that kindness mattered more than anything else. The poem whispered a simple idea into the night, that even in darkness, joy could arrive softly, that even in winter, warmth could find its way home, and that sometimes believing in a gentle story was enough to make the night feel less cold. Time, as it always does, moved quietly forward. Children who once listened wide-eyed to the poem grew older. They became parents themselves. And when Christmas Eve returned, year after year, they found the same words waiting for them. The poem did not age, but the man who wrote it did. Clement Clark Moore lived a long, gentle life. He continued teaching. He continued writing. He walked familiar streets and watched the world slowly change around him. Yet everywhere he went, the poem followed. It appeared in newspapers each winter. It was read aloud in homes he would never see. It was memorized by children he would never meet. For many years, Moore did not claim it publicly. The poem had been written privately, almost casually, and released without his name. It belonged to the people now. Eventually, Moore acknowledged that he was the author. But by then, it hardly mattered. The poem had grown beyond any single person. It had become tradition. As decades passed, the world transformed. Cities expanded, trains crossed countries, electric lights replaced candles. Still, every Christmas Eve, the same poem returned. Parents read it in quiet voices. Children listened, pretending to sleep. The rhythm of the lines felt like a lullaby, rocking households gently toward rest. Moore grew old. His voice faded, and then, one day, he was gone. But the poem did not notice. It continued traveling through time, carried by memory instead of ink. New generations read the same opening line. They imagined the same sleigh. They waited for the same quiet footsteps on the roof. Most never wondered who wrote it. They did not need to. The poem did not ask to be remembered as literature. It asked only to be felt. And that was why it survived. Many books were forgotten. Many poems disappeared. But this one returned every year, like the season itself. It became woven into childhood, into family ritual, into the shape of Christmas night. Even people who could not recall all the verses knew how it began. Those opening words were enough. They carried the rest with them. Moore's legacy was not fame. It was continuity, a gentle thread connecting generations who would never meet, but who would share the same quiet moment before sleep. Outside, snow would fall. Inside, a voice would read. And for a little while, time would slow. That is how stories live longer than people. They rest quietly, waiting for someone to speak them again. And each time they are spoken, they begin anew. The poem was born in America, but it did not stay there. Stories like snowflakes travel easily. They drift across borders, carried by voices, books, and memory. And slowly, Santa Claus began his quiet journey around the world. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, people crossed oceans more often. Immigrants carried traditions with them, folded carefully inside their lives. Among those traditions was a poem, soft, familiar, and full of warmth. When families settled in new lands, they brought Christmas with them. They brought the rhythm of the words. They brought the image of a gentleman in a sleigh. In Europe, Santa met older traditions. St. Nicholas already existed there, along with figures like Father Christmas and other winter spirits. But the poem's Santa did not push them aside. He blended. The stern bishop softened. The distant figure smiled. Santa became warmer, kinder, more playful. In England, Father Christmas slowly took on Santa's cheer. In Germany and the Netherlands, old legends mixed with the flying sleigh and reindeer. In Scandinavia, winter spirits borrowed Santa's laughter. Across borders, cultures reshaped him, but the heart remained the same. A visitor in the night, a giver, not a judge, a quiet bringer of joy. Illustrations spread through books and postcards. Later, advertisements carried Santa even farther. His image crossed languages without needing translation. Children everywhere understood him instantly. They did not need to know the poem. They felt it. By the early 20th century, Santa was everywhere. Not identical, but familiar. The red coat became more common, the white beard more universal, the round face more beloved. And still, beneath all the colors and styles, the poem remained the foundation. 8 reindeer, a sleigh, a night of quiet magic. Santa became a shared dream, a rare thing in a divided world. Even in places far from snowy winters, Santa arrived with the same promise. That joy could come quietly, without demand, without fear. Christmas nights in distant lands began to echo the same feeling. Lights glowing softly, children waiting in bed, parents whispering stories. The poem had done something extraordinary. It had taken one small vision and offered it to the world, and the world accepted. Santa became not just a symbol of Christmas, but a symbol of gentleness itself, a reminder that kindness could travel farther than armies, that imagination could cross borders more easily than power, and that one calm, simple poem could reshape how millions experienced a single winter night. And so, the story comes back to where it began, a quiet night, Outside, snow falls slowly, covering the world in white. The wind moves softly, careful not to wake anyone. Windows glow with candlelight, and inside, families gather close. A child lies in bed, eyes heavy, listening. Somewhere in the house, a familiar voice begins to read. "'Twas the night before Christmas." The words move gently through the room, just as they have for nearly 200 years. They do not rush, they do not shout, they simply unfold, line by line, like snow settling on the ground. The child imagines a sleigh, imagines reindeer, imagines a kind, quiet visitor who comes not to judge, but to give. And slowly, sleep arrives. This is the power of the poem. It did not invent Santa through force or spectacle. It invented him through feeling, through warmth, through gentleness, through trust. In a world that can often feel loud and uncertain, the poem offers stillness. It reminds us that magic does not need to be bright or overwhelming. Sometimes it is soft enough to whisper. Clement Clarke Moore never meant to shape the world. He only meant to shape a moment for his children. But moments, when shared, can become traditions. Traditions can become comfort, and comfort can last longer than any person ever could. So tonight, wherever you are, let the night be quiet. Let the story rest with you. Let the snow fall. And as sleep finds you, remember, some stories are not meant to be questioned. They are meant to be felt. And when they are, they stay with us. Gently, forever.